Hi, I have a very exciting episode for you today, and it's all about a new mixed media combination that I've never tried before. And let me tell you, I have tried just about everything. A few years ago, I started what's called this hot dog packet, which is basically I went around to a bunch of mixed media artists to find out what their favorite layering combinations were, because not all combinations work. If you combine a Stabilo all with some water, you can make a mess in about 0.4 seconds if you're not careful, if you're not familiar with the characteristics of your mediums and how they interact with each other. So I actually put this into a giant PDF. It's 32 pages because I wanted to see what other artists were doing. And that way I could embark on some new lessons. As the founder of Awesome Art School, I come up with about 8 original new lessons in drawing and painting every single month. So I'm chronically looking for inspiration, references, and ways of doing things that I know are going to work, because I can't waste any time mixing my mediums together if it's going to cause a disaster. I don't have time. So the other day, this is so fun. The other day I was actually working on an alcohol marker project for my Celtic Collective club that I run with my friend Lucy Brydon, and we are doing dryads, which is basically, it's a form of a fae creature. We do all fantasy themes in this club. I have 2 other clubs as well, but that's what we focus on this one. And I was doing her in alcohol markers, and I was like, I wanted to put these vines around her neck, but with alcohol markers, you can't layer them because they're not opaque. You can layer them like crazy, but you can't cover up because they're not opaque. They're all transparent, and they're specifically made to blend together, not to slap one dark color over the other one. So I was racking my brain, what can I use? And also, alcohol markers cannot be combined with acrylics, because acrylics, the alcohol can eat through your acrylics. Bad things happen. I have a whole book on what your supplies do and what not to do with them. I was thinking though, but what could I use that would create a nice bold layer on top of my alcohol markers? Colored pencils would work, but if that's not bold whatsoever, you could do some inks. That would work, but I wanted to do some leaves and some branches that have some darker craggy bits and then some lighter highlighted bits. I'm like, what medium could I do with my alcohol markers? And then it hit me. I could use traditional gouache. Now there's quite a number of different kinds of gouache. So why traditional? Well, the 2 major kinds of gouache are traditional and acrylic. We already talked about how you cannot use acrylic. So in this case, I was like, but I could use traditional gouache because 1, it is opaque, which is exactly the look that I was trying to achieve. But 2, it's completely water soluble. It's like watercolors, and it won't talk to my alcohol markers whatsoever. And I know my alcohol markers are not going to eat away at anything water soluble. They just ignore each other and they live a very peaceful existence. So I thought it was okay. So I wanted to just share 2 projects that I ended up doing because I had so much fun making the first one and the effect was so cool. So I thought I would give you a little peek at that one. And then I did one afterwards, another dryad that I taught live with my friend Lucy. So I was just going to let you in, kind of watch over my shoulders so you can see how they progress and look at the kind of final result, which again is what I was looking for, which is having these kind of faint, transparent, luminous underlayers that's created by the alcohol markers, and then the kind of bolder, opaque look of the gouache on top. And if you want the 32 page PDF that I have from all these other artists that have other successful mediums that you can layer together to not make a mess, but rather to make a masterpiece, just let me know in the comments and I will drop you the link. But without further ado, let me share these little projects so you can see what it looks like for yourself. And then if you try this at home, please let me know what it looks like and how you like it and what you think. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. All right, let's go check out the project. So I will start you off today midway through this project. I'm not showing you how I draw this because that would be more appropriate for my drawing channel, but this is the ugly face. Let's just call it like it is. And that is pretty normal on every single face project that I personally have ever done. There's this miraculous ugly phase that things go through. So this so far is all just alcohol markers. I'm using a combination of Ohu and probably Copics and Art Bakes. What I love about alcohol markers, just as an aside, is that regardless of the brand, the kind of nib you're using, or even the barrel, all the ink works exactly the same and also can intermingle with one another as well. But alcohol markers for mixed media artists are pretty fussy. You can't put them over pretty much anything. They have to be the base layer, and then there's only a few things that you can layer on top, some of which I had already mentioned, like the colored pencils and ink. So you're super limited, and I do a ton of alcohol marker work over the years. I think I have over 7 published books that incorporate them in some way, and I can't believe that I've never thought of actually powering up some gouache on top until today. And I was so freaking pleased on how this all turned out that this is why I wanted to share it with you. I hadn't at this point yet, wasn't quite thinking of how I was going to add the interlocking kind of winding branches around her yet. I was really just focused really on blending all of those layers of alcohol markers on her face to get her to be gorgeous and really finish her in completely before adding the branches. Which, by the way, is like super terrifying, because what if you go through all that work and then you ruin it? Well, like I said at the beginning of the video, like, I don't have time to ruin anything. I gotta like bang out some really awesome stuff and then move on. So she's super ugly face right now. And the only thing that will ameliorate that is adding more and more layers. And that's the beauty of alcohol markers and really what their superpower is. So if you are new to alcohol markers, I have actually a huge number of tutorials on markers on my drawing channel. I'll link to that in the description box. But layering is your best friend, and I will shut up. You can watch her kind of come to fruition. I sped through, and then you can see when we go and add the gouache what that effect looks like on top. Okay, so we finally have as good as I'm gonna get for right now, and I'm now going with the traditional wash of gouache on top. The blue part was actually supposed to be her dress, and it ends up looking like water. So I just went with the water, actually, since she is a dryad. She's one with nature, even despite her dangling earrings as you do. But immediately I'm like, oh, yes, this is so satisfying. A quick word about paper, too. You can actually totally use gouache on Bristol, and Bristol, coincidentally, is my top favorite choice for working with alcohol markers. So it's another really good reason why these two unexpected mediums can combine very successfully together. It was such like a fun little eureka moment that I was quite unprepared for. So I'm using a dark brown mixture of, I believe this is gouache by Turner. And again, like I said before, this is traditional gouache, which means it's just like watercolor, but it's opaque so that it's super water soluble, and so it will react over and over if you add water to this, but we are using this in almost like a dry fashion, meaning between every single layer, I'm letting everything dry. So I'm not using a lot of blending techniques. I'm just layering on top of one another the different colors of the traditional gouache as I lay them on top of her. And right away, I'm like obsessed, because this sort of super bold, dramatic twig vine look, I wanted to look like it was quite literally wrapping around her. And had I done that with the markers, you can see like her dark hair, the darkest part of her hair is about the equivalent of the gouache. And look how faded and transparent it looks. It's such a completely different look. So using them together, I feel, is so super powerful. And I am, obsessed. So I let that first layer dry. I did then a subsequent layer of one shade lighter, and then this is shade 3. Now these aren't particularly like super realistic looking branches, but I wanted this sort of almost like an animated character sort of effect. I don't know, reminiscent of some of the cool animated cartoons that I used to watch as a girl. And so you have this sort of like beautiful graphic style, just something a little bit unique. Again, I have to come up with 8 brand new, completely different projects for all of my different clubs every single month. So pushing the boundaries and also making quite varied projects every single month across all 3 clubs is super important. Definitely keeps me on my toes and keeps flexing my creativity as we go from month to month and from club to club. So now I wanted to add some of these leaves. And yes, you saw me working with a reference. I always work from references. Human beings as artists we are recreating what we are seeing. So I'm putting my unique touch on all of these, using the references as a guide to inform my color choices or stylistic choices. Also helps hugely as a teaching aid for my students, so they also know what I'm following along, and then they can follow along with as well. So adding some green leaves all around her hair is super duper fun. And again, using a 2-tone, so that just gives them a little bit more of a 3-dimensional look, even though again, it's more of a graphic cartoony style. Now, another really popular addition and layer to alcohol markers that's super popular is to use color pencils on top. So it's a great way to fix mistakes, ease the transition between any areas that like are a little awkward or the contrast is too much. So this is a beautiful colored pencil layer that you can always use with or without your gouache in between. You can always rely on colored pencils to marry really well with not only alcohol markers, but also watercolors. They really go hand in hand. I actually hate colored pencils on their own, but I love to couple them with these other mediums. As a mixed media artist, they help fine tune, produce glows, produce some shading effects as well. And then last but not least, of course, I always save lashes for last, and I have lots of videos on lashes. I also have a whole recent video on this exact pen that I'm using to do her lashes. And so this was the completed look after doing that combination of the gouache and the alcohol markers, and I thought it came out so well. So before we go though, I also wanted to show you another project that we did using the same combination of supplies. So this is from a live that I did with my friend Lucy Brydon. So that first dryad you saw me just do is for the Celtic Collective, which is one of my 3 art clubs over at Awesome Art School. And every month I also do a live workshop in all 3 clubs as well. So I had just come off the heels of that gouache and alcohol markers, and I was like so obsessed. And I said to Lucy, I'm like, I want to do it again, but I want to do it on the live because it was just so much fun, and I wanted to see if it would work for more than one project, see how many different ways we can get creative with that effect. So we found this adorable little green man. And what's fun about teaching with Lucy is that I think it's really beneficial to our members because we have really different styles. So like my alcohol marker style and way of coloring is completely different than Lucy's. So our members always get basically you get a double lesson from us because you're learning simultaneously 2 completely separate ways to do the same exact project. So you can quite literally glean from each of us, try both, and then see what resonates and works best for you. Maybe a little bit from me, maybe a little bit from Lucy. And that is in fact what our members do. And the effects are super duper fun. So on our live, we drew this guy from scratch. We always teach our drawing as well as our painting and rendering, unless we're super short on time. Occasionally, I think maybe twice we've done a transfer on our lives before we started coloring, so we could focus on our painting and whatnot. But this guy was so fun. So as you can see, like I was already done with my alcohol marker part and Lucy was still going. So I forged on ahead because I'm super impatient. I was dilly-dallying. I actually introduced a different kind of Ohuhu marker, which is what I'm using now, which is a water-soluble, just like illustration, has like dye-based in it. Dye-based ink, which is actually also awesome to use with alcohol markers because they don't interact with one another. But just like my issue was with working with the alcohol markers, they're not opaque. So you can like layer and add, but you're not going to cover up anything at all. So here we are just adding our final tweaks in marker before we make the switch to gouache, which is what we're about to do in just a second. You'll see me. So now Lucy is still futzing around with her alcohol marker designs, and I'm like, I'm done. I'm done waiting. I'm forging ahead. So I picked out a bunch of green gouache. Again, this is traditional gouache by Turner, but you could use any brand. Just make sure it's traditional and it is not acrylic gouache. All right. So as long as you have those, you're pretty much all set to go. So I had, look at me, I mixed a color, you guys. This is like brand new territory for me. I'm such a lazy painter and I always just use whatever like squirts out of the tube. So I'm diving in now for gouache. And what's a little bit more subtle about this project than the last one that I showed you is that we're working in the same, it's like very monochromatic. So my gouache is green and my markers are also green, which was the opposite of the last one, right, where the vines were super dark and were in great contrast to the rest of her face. So this was interesting because it was slightly different because we're using a monochromatic color scheme, but just super different materials. So Lucy still futzing and I am forging away with my gouache. And yeah, it's super interesting to see how they come together. And again, for our lucky members, they get to see two ways of doing that. And some projects, Lucy's faster than me, and some I'm usually the faster one, but it just depends on the project. And you can see the clever way that Lucy is still layering the beard here. And there's one thing too, because gouache is opaque, we actually wanted quite a dark background for underneath his beard, because when we add the white, we need the beard to show through. So if we have a really light background and then we have the white beard, it's actually not going to show up. So it was quite important to lay down those darker bits. I'm just actually laughing because Lucy's still in markers. She's still in markers and I've been gouaching for quite a long time. So what I noticed with my gouache is that in order to get it to flow, you do have to add a little bit of water. And then that, of course, makes it a little less opaque, right? So I started off with just a thin layer of the gouache so that I could get the quote unquote background of his beard and his hair all set. And then immediately I was like, okay, but I'm going to need some brighter white. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But laying down a nice layer, a soft layer. Now I could also just stop with that. So I tried to do a little bit more concentrated amount of the white gouache, but even that wasn't quite enough. And so you'll see in a second my workaround for that. And this is also what I love about being a mixed media artist, is that you're in a constant state in which you're always problem solving, right? It's okay, what do I do now? What do I do next? How do I solve this problem? This beard is not dark enough. What can I do so that this looks okay? And in this case, I went ahead and built up a lot of layers of the gouache on his beard, and that would create like a barrier between what I'm going to add on top and the alcohol markers beneath. Remember, because I said that anything acrylic can't be hanging out with anything alcohol because they don't like each other. But if you have a layer of gouache between it, you can use it as like a buffer, really. So I end up using a product at the end to really punch up his beard. I'll get to that when I get to that part. But in the meantime, Lucy finally gets to bust her gouache out, and then I go in with a darker color with the leaves. So now that I have the second and darker shade of green on the leaves, and I also added some shading with just graphite and a blending stump, I can now add just a small layer of highlights and white using my Copic white over any areas that I know have a good solid gouache base for me, so that I don't run the risk of having any weird reaction. And you can see finally Lucy is on the right and she is going in Gangbusters, and she is using Kuretake ink and white as well. So because you can see on mine, his beard is quite transparent still because the gouache had a lot of water in it. And so she wanted to make her fuller effect. She used that Kiritake ink. And ink is an awesome addition to alcohol markers, and there is no interaction. And you can see here I'm using I used graphite and my blending stump in order to accentuate the different shaded regions. And you can see here Lucy on the right is using her colored pencil in the same way I was using colored pencil in the last project to add shading, details, and you can also add quite a lot of beautiful glows as well. So I hope that this is a cool new combination of materials that maybe you have never tried before or thought of before. And if you're going to go ahead and try it, let me know, and also let me know how it goes. If you want information on any of my art clubs, just check the link in the description box below. And also, if you want that 32-page PDF that has different ways that you can layer different art supplies that are not going to make a mess, just let me know in the comment section below, and I'd be happy to drop you that link for you. And I will see you next Wednesday with a new project. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.